It's fun to be back. I admittedly haven't been here in a little while, but I think I did it might have been the very first orange sofa talk. We were out there long, long time ago. So thanks for welcoming me back. Who's the newest resident? Who moved in most recently, do you think? Anyone lived here less than a year? Well, we got OGs in the room. 2 years? Really? Three? Four? Four. Okay. But so everyone's four, and how about longer? Who's been here a long time? Yeah. As Chris mentioned, we called it town manager at the time, executive director now. So Chris's job in Verado, and also lived there. We raised our family there. So I was looking out here, and it goes fast, doesn't it? Those of you that have children, I remember moving into Verado. It feels like it was just yesterday, and my boys were 4 and 6. They're now 25 and 27. But the reason I want to share that story with you is because we have a lot in common, and I really can appreciate how you live your life here in Eastmark, not just professionally speaking, but also, as a consumer of community life through Cohere. Prior to that, DMB and Brookfield. And as Chris mentioned, we were really curious about this question a couple of years ago. We felt like we were really driving value for our business partners like Brookfield, through the development of a cohesive place and really engaging residents in deep and meaningful ways. But we wanted to, test our assumptions. And so we did just that, and I'll share the results. And I think you'll be as impressed as we are really with what you all are doing here. Because as you'll see in slide like 18 or something, you're a critically important component to the equation. But I get ahead of myself. Let me back up just for a second. So who is Cohere? So we actually have been around for almost 30 years. But our first 20 years or so, 21, we actually were an in-house division of the developer DMB. So you all recall DMB, I'm assuming, I'm not sure, maybe it depends on when you moved in, but DMB was the original developer of Eastmark, and then ultimately, long story short, partnered with Brookfield. And in 2017, that developer, DMB, went through a corporate restructure. So it was a huge corporate, restructure with a management company, and the developer DMB Associates, they kind of bifurcated and did their thing as a development company. But all of us that were in what we call the support divisions of the master developer, marketing, IT, finance and accounting, community life, had to figure out what was going to happen with those enterprises. And so in 2018, we formed Cohere. We went to DMB and we essentially said, since you're restructuring and you won't be employing us any longer, rather than going out to market, why don't we form a company, just keep going, and you'll be our first clients. And they said, yeah, that sounds great, because we can relinquish that side of the business, which we're trying to do anyway, and then we can just keep going. So that worked out beautifully between Cohere and DMB. And at the same time, during that restructure, DMB and Brookfield switched positions here at Eastmark. And so Brookfield essentially became the majority owner and primary developer of the community. And so going forward, the developer here, of course, has been Brookfield. Worked out really wonderfully for Cohere, because really just overnight we had our first client. We were in-house at DMB. We had 5 communities here in Arizona. We had 27 people servicing those 5 communities. Eastmark, of course, being one of them. Verado, Victory, Marley Park, and a place called One Scottsdale at 101 and Scottsdale Road. And so we formed that company, and then Brookfield formed. And so we started working with Brookfield here. Fast forward 9 years later, we have all of Brookfield's large scale planned communities in Arizona and Texas and Colorado and California and Washington and Boston now. And so we have enjoyed a wonderful relationship with Brookfield. But we also have 15 or 16 other developer clients, and we now have over 50 communities in 10 states across the country. And the reason I'm sharing that story with you is to help you understand who Cohere is and how we were formed, but also going to tell you why that's happened, because this is it, what I'm about to share with you. And it's what DMB knew all along when they started DC Ranch back in the 1980s, was that the secret sauce to the place will be the people themselves. That the real magic of a place are the people themselves. It's what I like to say at Cohere: our residents are our greatest asset. And the Great Park is amazing, and the events are extraordinary, and the swimming pools off the hook, and just the parks and the connectivity and the built environment is only one ingredient. At the end of the day, it's the people themselves that will bring the place to life or not, and create the dream fulfillment that DMB and then Brookfield was looking for in the first place. And so when we formed Cohere, we said, we have a really powerful idea that we cultivated for like 20 years at DMB that we can take out to market. Just a few short years later, we've gained a lot of traction across the country, which sort of proved the idea that the product was high quality and would be in demand for other places like Eastmark. And so fast forward to today, and that's true. But the other thing that happened simultaneously to that was the loneliness epidemic. And so it's a bit of a sobering idea, but we saw it as an opportunity to really grow our value in places like Eastmark. Because do you know we're the loneliest society in human history? We are right now today, human beings have never been lonelier in their entire existence. And so we saw that at Cohere as a tremendous opportunity to really make a difference. And one of the things I can promise you, we now have over 50,000 homes across the country. If you live in a Cohere community, you're not going to be lonely. I mean, think about where you live here in Eastmark. Loneliness is pretty far down the list of adjectives that you would come up with to describe your experience here. So let's talk about why this is super important, not only for us at Cohere, but for each of you as you live your individual lives, raise your families, and connect with your neighbors and friends. So we determined that our whole purpose was going to be to bring the life-changing power of community to the world. Everybody at Cohere, whether you're an accountant or a landscaper or the director of community engagement, believes in your soul that there's power in community and there's value associated with people coming together in community. We just happen to translate that into real estate value because that's what business that we're in. But I'm here to amplify those points about why that's so important and how you live your everyday lives, regardless of real estate value. So we started with this question: what if the neighborhood itself could actually make you feel better? So that was the hypothesis. So we actually engaged a research firm out of New York. It was a former professor friend of mine who was at ASU. He did his PhD dissertation on community engagement in Verrado. Literally, he was there for like 6 months. He worked with everybody, and he did his entire dissertation on the purposeful, meaningful, deep level of engagement that was taking place in Verrado. And then he went away and did his thing, and we kind of forgot about it. But when we raised this question, I said, hey, we could probably call Craig Talmadge, Dr. Talmadge. I called ASU. Oh, he left a long time ago. He's in New York. We tracked him down. We said, we want to run a study with you asking this question of our neighborhoods. And we would like you to tell us what are the things, we need to make it research-based and scientific. So you tell us what the questions are. What are the things that we actually need to study to try to figure out, are people healthy? Are they well? Do they feel safe? Do they feel like they can trust their neighbors? And then beyond that, would you study the people outside of Cohere communities? Because we don't have access to them. And he said, you bet. And so we did a joint research study across multiple states. But before we get into the results, I want to just tee up, and we were talking about this at dinner, and I told you there would be a whole slide on this, a distinction that makes Cohere raise questions like this in the first place. I mean, why is a company that is technically in the property management business raising questions about, are our residents healthy and well? I'm here to submit to you the rest of the industry isn't raising those types of questions. And the reason they're not is because they're in what I call HOA property management. So I don't know if you've studied HOAs like I have, but you might know that they were actually formed outside of Los Angeles in the early 1900s. And it was just a sort of a small subdivision outside of LA. And then they really grew in prominence after World War II with the invention of the subdivision and suburban America and our love affair with the automobile and how we started to take our communities and we started to separate them out. You live over here, you work over there, you recreate over there. Leave It to Beaver was super popular. Everybody wanted the white picket fence, out in suburbia. And so 125 years later, our industry has done the same thing. They've woken up every day to take care of property. We are not in the property management business at Cohere. At Cohere, property management is a strategy, not an aspiration. It's a strategy, not an aspiration. Now, I'm not confused. It is the key fundamental for our business success. Let's face it, the number one reason you all choose to live in a place like Eastmark is because of the built environment. It's because of the way it looks and how beautiful it is and how well maintained it is. That doesn't mean that's the purpose. It just says it's an important fundamental. It would be like suggesting the purpose of football is blocking and tackling, right? You don't even have to know anything about football to know that's not the purpose. You also probably know it is a core fundamental. If you can't block and tackle, you can't play football, right? Too rough for me. I couldn't even do the core fundamental. But we all know the purpose of football is to score, right? It's a strategy, not an aspiration. Think about it in our context. What if our team woke up every day thinking about my only job is to take care of the built environment of this place? What would their opinion of you be? What would their perception of you be? They would very likely not want to engage with you. Do people improve property or do they detract from it? Of course. They deteriorate property. They ruin it. There's even a name in the industry. We call it attractive nuisance. We start to call people attracted. Like we can't put a slide in our park. That's an attractive nuisance. Have you heard this term? It's really off-putting at best, right? Nobody looks at a slide at Cohere and thinks attractive nuisance. You know what they imagine? A grandparent at the bottom of the slide, catching their child, creating memories, shared memories, generations of connection and neighborliness and support and belonging. If you're in the property management business, you literally don't even think in those terms. But at Cohere, we're in the community building business, whereby property management is the core fundamental, but we put the sugar on top, which is all of the engagement and the connectivity and the outreach and the leadership and the committees and the board work and the volunteerism and the events. And I could go on, right, Peyton? Yeah. And so first and foremost, we just shift the mindset at Cohere, and it's a game changer for everything that we do. Because if you're not on board, and our team knows this, if you don't truly believe that community has life-changing power, work in property management, go work somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with it. I have no opinion about the rest of the industry. I'm not judgmental about it at all. I just think we're in a different business. We hear this all the time. Our competition is underperforming I say that they're maybe not. Maybe they're performing to the expectations that they've set for themselves, which is to go in there and take care of the property, right? But at a place like Eastmark, which, by the way, from the very beginning, the founder said, what is the number one word that Eastmark is about? Connectivity, 100%. It drove the entire vision. How are we going to ensure that people are connected here? So let's get into the data a little bit. Oh, let me just back up. If you don't believe me, I highly recommend these two books right here. So the first one is The Lonely Century, written by Norina Hertz. She's the one who posits that we're the loneliest century in human history, and her book basically, underscores the reasons why. It's e-commerce, the technological sort of advancements. It's how we live our lives. It's, work from home. I mean, the list, sort of goes on and on. It's all the assumptions that you're making about why people are lonely today. And so she unpacks that in her book. I highly recommend it if you're curious on the topic. The other one is Vivek Murthy, who's the former Surgeon General, and he's worked for multiple administrations, so it's not a political statement. But he actually wrote a letter to the country when he was leaving office this last time, which was a warning about the loneliness epidemic coming out of his book. He actually equates loneliness to, it's the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yeah, it's just fascinating the impacts that it has. I mean, I'm reading more and more about this because, again, I see a tremendous opportunity for us in our space. And so, admittedly, I have a business interest in understanding this topic. But I also believe in my soul that community matters. I live in a community. I participate in community. And I believe that community is the antidote to loneliness. And you see it in droves. I mean, I'm reading now about people entering hospice, and they're sending them home because they found community in hospice. They just needed some connection, and they actually were no longer dying, literally saving their lives, right? We literally need one another. And our team here could tell stories for days about the importance of connection in people's lives. When I was town manager in Verrado, I had a woman named Myrna. I'll never forget her. We cried together. She came up to me, she put both hands on my shoulders, looked me right in the eye, tears in her face, and said, "This place saved my life." Literally, those were her words. I said, "Myrna, let's talk." And she was not going to live any longer until she moved to Verrado. And it's a very long story, but she found community and it literally saved her life. But even if it's not something as dramatic as that, it's just knowing your neighbors and the importance of having someone that you can depend on and trust, maybe to watch the dog in a pinch. I remember, when we were living in Verrado, we used to go on vacation. I'd ask my wife, we'd be leaving. We'd be halfway to San Diego or something. Who's watching the dog? I don't know. Well, I got it. Don't worry about it. She'd literally say that, "I got it." You know why? She had 25 kids to choose from. 25 kids. One time the school principal came up to me and said, "Todd, I have a problem with after-school pickup." And I said, "Well, that's kind of an unusual thing that you're bringing that to me. That seems kind of like the principal's issue." And she said, "No, it's your issue. Let me tell you why. You ever seen this piece of paper?" And I had, and if you're a parent, you know exactly what it is. It's the thing you fill out, and does your kid have any allergies and stuff like that, emergency contact at the bottom. She said, "I've been a principal for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this." Every kid has like 20 names on this list. She turned the paper over, and this parent had listed like 20 people as the emergency contact to pick up her kid in an emergency. She said, "In all the other places I've been working, you're lucky if you get a grandparent on that name." People are lonely. It's very real, and we have the antidote, and you guys are living it, and you're an important part of the formula. So let's just get into the data a little bit. So we asked these questions. We went across, I think it was 3 or 4 states, thousands of residences with Dr. Talmadge and our team doing the internal ones. Did Eastmark part? Yeah, so you all were part of this survey. Your answers are in here. And then, so this is what Dr. Talmadge said. He said really cohesive places, places that are healthy and well and prosperous, have these 11 indicators that you want to measure. And so that's what we did. And Cohere communities outperformed neighboring communities in all 11 categories by significant margins. And so we just pulled a few for tonight in the interest of time to share with you, but they're all similar themes. So the first theme I'd like to point out is the support for the loneliness, idea. And so if you look at 4 of these sample questions that are around feeling safe, mental health, feeling like I belong, and I can trust people in an emergency. I mean, look at the response of the other neighborhoods. They're in the 60, percentiles, which again is, only 6 out of 10 people reported, that they feel good about themselves. And so on one hand, super sobering that the loneliness epidemic is real. On the other hand, look at the impact that Cohere, in partnership, because again, it's not just us, there's 3 legs to the stool. I'm talking about us at the moment, but we'll get to the others in a second. In partnership with the developer and the residents, create these kinds of results, which are dramatic improvements to the surrounding neighborhoods. So look at this, 92% of residents responded saying they feel safe in their neighborhoods. And many of our communities are 55, we actually call them 55 and better communities. And you can imagine how important, you can imagine how important that indicator is as we age. And I'm aging and I feel it. I understand where that comes from. I didn't get it early on. What are my parents so afraid of all the time, right? But you start to understand it as you age. In fact, we were in San Francisco one time, and my wife and we were walking one of my son's friends who we met. He was 30, and she said, we have to walk him to the BART, because it's like the Mission District. And I said, well, first of all, he's 30. And as we were walking to the BART, I said, we have it backwards. He should be walking us. What are we doing? We need to turn around. He's perfectly fine on his own. So these indicators of safety and security and trust are hugely important in people's lives, not just as we age, but also in young people's lives. One of the things we're looking for with our developer partners is what we call free-range children. Free-range children, where they're safe and secure. We raised free-range children. Never forget, we went to the Diamondbacks game, first time, kids are 5 and 7. They'd lived in Verrado for like a year, so they had this experience where they're being free-range. So took them to their first Diamondback game after we moved out to Verrado. We're sitting down, kind of by the field. My son goes, where's the music coming? The organ. He was curious about, dun, 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 all that. And I said, oh, and I pointed, and y'all have been to the Diamondbacks. It's like it's way up there at the very top, and you can finally see it. And he goes, okay, there it is up there. And he goes, come on, Trev. And he grabs his brother. They're like 5 and 7. And he starts to leave. And I said, where are you going? He goes, we're going up there. He said, we'll be right back. And I said, no, it doesn't work that way. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is what we do. This was a free-range child. He couldn't understand how the rest of the world didn't have these kinds of safety and security. So they have to put in measures. It was really fascinating to watch that. They used to ask me all the time when we'd leave Verrado, what's wrong with everybody around here? I kid you not. It would be, your kids are going to do this. They're going to go outside of Eastmark and say, everybody seems kind of grumpy. It's like, well, actually, not everybody's being raised in a community where they can trust their neighbors and they feel good and safe and secure. And we could go on and on. There's 11, but the numbers are really overwhelming, and they're critically important for how we live our daily lives. So let's unpack how we get there. This is that 3 kind of part series. So we've been talking a lot about, I'm going to get a little bit more into this middle rung here, which is what we call our community building model. It is what we layer on top of a typical community management structure. So if we were just doing property management and you're imagining sort of a hierarchical kind of pyramid, of course that would be the fundamental at the base, because again, that's the core ingredient. But there's something on top that's really important. And over the past 30 years, we've developed kind of an expertise on how to do that successfully. And then the other two are our developer partners and what they've done with the built environment. So we spend a lot of time working on vision, planning, and design with our developer partners. We were in the room, for all of this. And that's not usual in the industry. Oftentimes companies like ours are not invited until the end. It's like once we figure it all out, then we'll sort of give it to you and, just keep it clean, and safe and, that kind of thing. Where at Cohere, we really are raising our hand, and we used to do this at DMB. I call them campaigns. We'd just go over and show up and say, hey, by the way, if you're developing a place for people, don't you want people's voice in the room now? Like, why would we wait? And so we're representing all of you in the planning and design stage long before you even get here. And now that we have that 30 years of experience, we can call on any number of categories, from how big the pool equipment should be to, the site plan for the amenity complex. How do people get in and out? All of those questions. Because at the end of the day, when we're creating a built environment, we can either create places for people or we can create places that aren't for people. There's very little in between. And you've been to a lot of communities and you drive through them and you look around and you immediately think, this ain't for anybody. The CEO of DMB says all the time, most places you can fire a cannon off and everybody's going to be just fine because nobody's out, nobody's connected, nobody's engaging. That's because the built environment wasn't built with you in mind, right? And so we spend a lot of time consulting with developers, helping them create what we call people-forward design. And I mean, even Verado, places like that DMB did, sometimes it's just a miss because they didn't have someone in the room saying, oh, by the way, if we're going to have this happen before I was hired, and that doesn't mean it's about me. It means that Community Life wasn't in the room when they were first planning Verado yet. And they said, we're going to have this town. Has anyone been out there? They have this wonderful town square. And, just a couple of weeks ago, they had 5,000 people, watching, what was the band? Everclear, and the Beach Boys have played there. And, I mean, it's a huge deal. And it's kind of like your, giant festivals. They didn't put any power in the town square. None. Whoops. Yeah. And I mean, this is one of the most successful developers in the Western United States for 30 years. But there wasn't a Todd or Chris or Peyton or anybody else in the room going, if we have a band, you're really going to need some power. And it was just a miss. And so sometimes it's the mundane and the practical, but they become hugely important conversations that we're in that built environment category. And then the last piece is all of you, and you showing up and participating in the process. And we do everything we can to remove what we call at Cohere social friction. The other thing that happens in a property management environment is a callousness towards the residents themselves. So if you're not interested in engaging them in really meaningful ways, then you do some sort of half-hearted attempt to do that, like an cruddy email that goes out and nobody really even opens it because it's not branded. And it's the open rate, by the way, in the industry is like in the 30%. Outside of Eastmark, only 30% of the residents open their email from their management company. I mean, that seems like it's a pretty important indicator, that you should make a more concerted effort to connect with your residents. At Cohere, it's in the 80, it's like 84% or something. It's very high. And there's a reason for it. It's because we're relentless about this idea that community cohesion has value in people's lives that translates ultimately into real estate value. And so you have to work very diligently towards resident participation. You can't just put up a sign and say, we hope people come. I mean, I hear it from our colleagues all the time. We tried that with our residents. Our residents are kind of apathetic. It's like, come on. I mean, people moving into a place like Eastmark are apathetic. I'm not buying it, right? What they have is friction getting in the way. They've got soccer practice and homework and, drop-offs and all kinds of things, going, and parents that are sick and their, adult children they're trying to raise. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so because we're relentless about this, we're going to help remove the friction. We have no judgment about who does or doesn't participate. But what we have found is that if we can eliminate friction and we can create a smooth transition towards engagement, like an email that someone actually wants to read, then you reach these kinds of success numbers. If you don't try, you don't get there. Okay, so again, I think I sort of said all of this. Our ideal scenario is when we're in a community from the very beginning. Of those 50 or so communities, the overwhelming majority of them we are in from the very beginning. Sometimes we're not. It's managed, residents are already there and they're going through a transition or they want to make a change. And if it's the right fit in the right location with the right developer partner, yeah, you bet. We can come in and make improvements and carry on from there. But our ideal scenario is just like Eastmark, where we were there from day one, helping determine all the way down to where the light switches should be in this building, all the way through the turnover process, which is right around the corner for you all here at Eastmark. And then this is a model of what we call our community building framework. Unique engaged communities from within. I call it building community from the inside out, rather than the top down or the outside in or the expert sort of parachuting in and dictating. We're going to dance with who brung us, and so if people are showing up, they're volunteering, they're talking about a car show, they're leaning in. We're going to be responsive. I trust that you see that in the team here. And it's been that way from the beginning. The Eastmark team are exemplars across our company. I'll have you know, we look to the team and the place routinely. In fact, they're sort of constantly giving tours and showing it off. So you got a really super squad. And it's because they're all subscribing to this idea. And they're waking up every day thinking about engaging people in meaningful ways to help improve their health and their well-being. They're not just showing up, turning on the lights and, closing the door. And I call it head down and myopic. At Cohere, we're going to be head up and expansive because there's too much opportunity here. So the founder then creates this, it all starts with this idea, which is the vision. So if you just take Eastmark, anyone know just sort of the vision of Eastmark? I mentioned it earlier, super simple. It's like literally one word. It's 100% about connectivity. It's all about connectivity. And so what did they lean into to create connectivity from a built environment perspective? It's the amenity complex and the Great Park, which is massive and hugely important, the heart and soul of the place. Of course, peppered with, dare I say, I don't know, dozens? How many parks do you have, Chris? How many? 76, yeah. So dozens is very fair, throughout the community. And obviously, that's the built environment, creating the through line for connection and the vision. And so we're determined to help them achieve their dreams. And so we feel it's our responsibility to help articulate the vision, to help animate the vision, to help illustrate, the vision. And to engage our residents in a way that they become participants in the vision as well. For example, a very stark one in Colorado, it'll be 9,600 homes. It's in Broomfield, Colorado, just north of Denver. Almost 10,000 homes, so very big. How many is Eastmark? Yeah, so twice as big as Eastmark, so huge. And the developer's dream is for the community to be carbon neutral at build out. So 0 footprint. And the first thing I said to them when we signed on was, what are the residents' role in that? And what do you mean? We just have to make sure the buildings, so that all they were thinking about was, how do we get to carbon neutral with green buildings and partnerships and solar and all of that? I said, what if all 20,000 residents are letting the water run while they're brushing their teeth? Are you going to reach your vision? No. So there's a huge educational process that has to occur right? In partnership with the residents themselves. So this compelling vision doesn't work if somebody isn't announcing it, someone isn't celebrating it. So of course, you can imagine the team in Broomfield is keen on this idea of celebrating that vision. And so for years, they're going to be talking about sustainability and the environment, and every event is going to be, no trash zones, and on and on and on. So they're cultivating a culture of sustainability because they're critically important equation to the developer's dream. So once this occurs, this is all based on social science and research for behavior change. And so if people understand the vision and they're here, they're signing up, right? So I always tell our team, our residents are predisposed to building community. They literally signed up. You opted into Eastmark. I don't think anybody came to Eastmark and said, I could really get away from it all here, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's really confused about the compelling vision. But we have an opportunity here to really ramp that up with all of you, because once the people understand that, they sign up and they participate. And people do it and that's why branding is so important. That's why this could be a marketing talk right now. I mean, people will start to act out on a brand. Remember the commercials when Apple was first getting popular, and they had the Mac person and the PC person, and the PC was all dorky in his Dockers, and the Mac person looked cool and in hoodies, and wouldn't you know it, that literally completely transformed how men in particular dressed in the workplace. I mean, CEOs making gazillion dollars are wearing hoodies, all based on this idea that was a compelling vision. It all stemmed right back to that commercial. And so people will act out on that. You can just do it on, one of the things I like to do is just observe friendship groups and how they look and talk and act alike. They even dress alike. You watch them walking down the street. Look at a group of young men or young women. The men got that funny llama cut. Your kids. Hey, they could make, I proudly wore a mullet in the 80s, so they could say right back at you, Dad. But the point is that if the vision is articulated well and it's compelling, the vision of connectivity at Eastmark, for example, it's no surprise to us that, volunteerism and committees and showing up and participation is through the roof. It's through the roof here. Clubs and groups. You could take any indicator in our sort of category of large planned communities, clubs and groups, volunteers, welcome programs. We just dwarf the numbers. Oh yeah, we live in this, I think there's 8 clubs, there's Mahjong, there's the typical ones. How many are here? I don't even know. 30. Yeah, typically dwarfing. So anyway, and then this last thing at the top here where we talk about engagement becomes really important at Cohere, because we could get high participation and stop there. And a lot of times in our industry, that is a standard. I hear it all the time. We have this really huge event. What's the first question people ask? Guaranteed. How many people came? How many people came? And if it's a lot of people, we feel successful. Okay. If it's not a lot of people, we don't. And sometimes that is an important indicator. You do want to drive traffic. But there's myriad other times where that's not in it. What about a more meaningful experience for people? What about what we call micro engagement at Cohere? The critically important exchange between a neighbor to neighbor at the mailbox. All of those things are what get you these kinds of results. So then what we've done is we've said, okay, we can't, each community has to be unique and different and driven by its vision and its offerings, the marketplace, who's going to move in, and on and on. And so when we were first forming Cohere, we said we can't replicate this over and over again. We can't do what we did at Verrado or Eastmark and just go out and do the bus is cool. It's amazing. In fact, people from all over the country come to see the bus, don't they, guys? Yeah, it's a big part of the tour. But, the next person's not going to want to, do the bus. But what we can do is put together frameworks that can be, to borrow a term from the tech world, white labeled, right? They can be customized and unique to each of the places. And so we have two frameworks that we're now employing across our portfolio that are really built on the success of, I would say, most particularly Eastmark and Verrado, maybe a little bit Victory. Those are our three kind of big mature communities here where most all of this stuff comes from. So the first thing we said is we're always going to lead with yes at Cohere. We're going to be talked into no. The rest of the industry has it backwards. Again, if your purpose in life is to manage property, you're going to be far more inclined to lead with no. Like, no, we're not doing that. Someone's going to die for sure. You know, a kid is going to, right? What about the children? You know, like, right? Just safety first, you know. But it doesn't mean we're not talked into no. Happens all the time. But it's not our starting place. We're going to start with yes. And the same thing is true of the residents. So when residents appear, we lean in with yes. You know, back in my community, we had a 3-legged blindfolded race with dogs and ice cream and, you know, on and on and on. We hear these kinds of, but we're going to lean in. That person wants to be involved. We're going to dance because they're dancing. And so how do we do that? Well, is a 3-legged ice cream dog race in the budget? You know, maybe not. We have pathways towards yes. So everybody that enters our space gets met with, yeah, you bet. How do we get there, right? Well, should we start a new annual tradition or signature event in Eastmark? Probably not. We've got some good ones. They're budgeted. The community supports them. They've evolved over time. Maybe your 3-legged dog idea isn't an annual tradition for 10,000 people on the Great Park, but you could start a club. And maybe there's other people that are interested in how did I get to 3-legged dogs? I don't know. But maybe there's other people interested in 3-legged dog races. And so the answer then becomes yes for that person. And then we watch and we pay attention. You know, and that all the time that happens. That's how communities evolve. That's how they grow. And that's how they build strength over time. Because if you want to do something that lasts, you do it together. And it might have been a great idea with one person, but does it have legs? Start a club, let's see. And then sure enough, I remember this happening in Verrado. Someone came and said yoga. And I said, you know, my wife does yoga. I think it's super cool, but there's like 30 people that live here. You know what I mean? You want to start a class? And why don't you start a club? Ignite, this was 20 years ago. Ignite Yoga, maybe you've heard of it. They are a huge, you know, yoga company now across Arizona. And they started at Verrado just as a club because there was one person who wanted to do yoga, and then she found another person, and then another person. And the idea of leading with yes leads to great outcomes. So the second framework is what we call land, brand, and locals. And so again, in order to create a unique experience for each one of our communities, we use this framework. So the first question is, what's the land and the built environment offering to us to build community? Is there a swimming pool? Are there parks? What's the culture and the history? In Verrado, for example, there was archaeology, there were petroglyphs, and the White Tank Mountains were an important part of the Native American, you know, culture back in the day. We had to understand all of that and how to celebrate that and bring it forward. That actually led to 10 years later, a conservancy for the White Tank Mountains that is not only doing that, but doing all kinds of other conservation. And that's because we paid attention to what the land offering was. So first is, and so our team will, in a new place, will actually just make a big old list. What is it? What are the land assets and offering? We have boats community. Is there a farm? We actually have, I think, 3 farms now in our communities. All of these things matter to our opportunity to build community. And then the second question is, what's the brand? What's the brand promise? What's the vision? Are we trying to be carbon neutral at the end of the day? Well, then we have to run a sustainability kind of effort. In fact, we're going to put forward probably the first ever chief sustainability officer in a community association. So there will be a position, full-time conservationist, scientist, you know, working in that community, because that's the brand and the dream of the place. And so that informs and shapes how we approach it. I mean, we have farmers on staff now, and we have, others that are growing. And then the last is the localness of place. And that we can start at the very beginning, even before residents get here. We were out here kicking dirt and building relationships with the chambers and the school districts and the city and the fire department and, all the others, and engaging those local providers and service offerings and bread makers and craft people. And you have a farmer's market here probably, yeah, right? So getting the local farmers, et cetera. And we take all of this framework and we put it into play in community by community. And then so ultimately we call this the social infrastructure. And when we're working with our developer partners is we talk to them about the importance of creating not only the physical infrastructure of place, but ultimately the social infrastructure, the heart and soul of the place. What's the governance? What's the budget? What's the plan for the amenity? And on and on. And then the last ingredient is all of you. And again, we're at a tremendous advantage because you're predisposed to building community. You're and by the way, these are they're informed generalizations, right? They're not 100%. So my guess is there's a couple people that live in Eastmark who are super private. They don't want anything to do with anybody, of course, because there's thousands of people who live here. And so we're going to get that kind of diversity. But on the whole, we know that people that choose places like Eastmark are choosing an engaged, connected way of living, generally speaking. It is, in fact, the premium associated with a place like Eastmark. And I can tell you again, I lived in a place like Eastmark for 15 years. So this is testimony. I participated in no less than 10,000 conversations with my neighbors over those years. Not one, you guys, I'm telling you, not one was about their house. Not one conversation. And their homes were beautiful. I was in hundreds of them routinely. They were gorgeous and they were fun. Backyard barbecues and swimming. But what brought value to people's lives wasn't the countertop. It was what happened in between the houses, 100%. And so you all have an important part of that equation. We are super grateful that you've not only signed up, but you're participating and engaging and leading and leaning in and knowing your neighbors and knowing when to do that and when not to do that. I mean, again, this is not carte blanche here. This is a general, kind of rule of thumb. And the science is clear on all of this. It's not only the big, powerful moments like when my fraternity brothers and I watched San Diego State in the Final Four a couple of years ago in Houston, and we're all thinking to ourselves, what are we doing here? The San Diego State Aztecs are in the Final Four. It was a life-changing experience. It was so powerful to have that experience with my brothers and friends and colleagues that I've known for so long. So those things are powerful, those moments that you have out here. But we also know now through the science that equally important are those micro exchanges. Saying hello to your neighbor, waving hello, creating an environment where kids like mine, when they go to other places, say, what's wrong with everybody around here? That's because the residents created an environment of care and connection for all of them. Even I used to say that anytime someone offers you water and you live in Arizona, 100% you say yes. Yes, water. We need to drink water for our health and benefit. But what I just learned recently is even a micro exchange as simple as accepting a cup of water from someone has a scientifically proven impact on both parties' health and well-being. Because it's a simple exchange of gratitude and thank you. Yes, thank you for the water. It's that simple. It's this sort of undertone that's happening routinely all around us. And we each have, in our opinion, a responsibility to participate in that if you're interested in health and well-being and safety and security and, meaningfulness and purpose and things like that. If you're not, then, sort of disregard what I'm saying. But if you're looking for these kinds of, outcomes, those things become critically important. I used to make fun of my dad all the time. My dad is a very vibrant, strong, young, 80, he'll be 89 in a couple of months, going on 69. And I'm here to submit, it is 100%. It's every exchange he's ever had throughout his life. I say to him all the time, we're just trying to buy the hot dog and you're taking forever, right? Just talking to this young man behind the counter and where'd you play ball and just on and on and on. And he didn't even know what he was doing, but he was creating a life of longevity and health and wellness for himself just by creating those little micro exchanges. So I know we're over time, but do we have 1 second to look at a video? If you got to go, I won't be offended. So this is one example. We could have a million videos, many of which would come right out of Eastmark, but this one's really fun. I know we're over time, so we'll just wrap here. So I do have some hard copies of the report, and then we also have I think there's a QR code, Peyton, if you go up a little bit. There you go, if you want to get an electronic version of it as well. We really enjoy that video in particular because it represents 100% of what we're talking about. Our team, all they're doing at Kissing Tree for the deep end is removing friction. The heavy lifting, the ideas, the creativity, the collaboration. I mean, they're hosting events. I mean, the list goes on and on. All comes from our greatest asset, the residents themselves. And the reason that group has been able to flourish the way that they have is because of the team on the ground believing that this idea that community really is a powerful force in people's lives. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time. Yeah.
It's 7. We said this would go till 7, so if people need to leave, feel free. But I wonder if anybody else in questions. But take a few moments.
It's my strategy. I go to the very end and then not allow. No. I'm here all night. Whatever you want to talk about. And pardon me for going long. That was the short version, by the way, you guys. Questions, comments? All right. Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah.
First and all that community building, and
Yeah.
I'm just grateful that someone thought about it, the people, when building the build itself.
Yep.
Or we wouldn't have a place like this yet.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you for sharing. I am too, to your team in particular, and we've always had a great team at Eastmark because it's, people want to work here. It's a great place to work. But you got a great squad right now, and Chris has been amazing, and all you guys really appreciate it. And the truth be told, the jury's no longer out on this. When I first started, even at DMB, we had to convince ourselves that this was worthwhile. They kind of got it. I'm glad you're here, Todd, to figure it out. But to create, large investment of time and energy and money with an eye towards return on that investment, jury's no longer out on that. Brookfield is very clear about this, that they're going to make more money. I mean, and that's okay. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. And in fact, that is the point. You all are going to, make more money theoretically because of real estate value associated with your ownership. So those things need not. In fact, I know we're long, but Drew Brown, the DMB, the D in DMB, I was on the job 20 minutes and he called me into his office, which was very intimidating. I had just changed careers. I was trying to learn what I was doing. I was taking my family out to Verrado, and his office was the size of this building. And he said, sit down on the couch. And he said, what do you think you're doing here? And I went, oh my gosh, this guy is tough. And I gave a great answer of, my interview answer basically. And he said, that's not why you're here. And it was the right answer. He said, it's the right answer, Todd, but it's not why you're here. You're here to make money. That's your answer. He said, the good news is everything you just said makes us more money. So you have the right answer, but don't be confused by the idea. And at first I was kind of like, well, I think he's just schooling me up because I was recruited out of the nonprofit industry. Some of the folks at dinner learned this by DMB, which is not uncommon, by the way. We still recruit routinely from nonprofit professionals. They're wonderful community builders. So I thought he was just kind of, giving me the, we're the business here and you don't be soft, you nonprofit guy. But that's not at all what he was saying. He was saying, get your head around this idea that that profit motivation isn't a dirty word. In fact, we can have our cake and eat it too. And in fact, we should drive value for everybody, our residents, the school districts. Everybody wants to be in a place like Eastmark, and that value generation is a large part of that. And so there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, you bet. And, we could probably follow up this study with a real estate value study. And we did it anecdotally all the time at DC Ranch. We used to just compare through MLS stuff. DC Ranch, basically the same house. This was way back in the day. And like Greyhawk or other places, which were great places, surrounding neighborhoods. But there was always a premium associated with living in DC Ranch. And we knew intuitively it was this, and now we have the science to prove it. The premium associated with Eastmark goes beyond the built environment for sure. It is that connection and connectivity, and that's why, hope you never sell, but if you did, you're going to get more than the guy across the street, or gal, pardon me. Yeah, for sure. And that's in all of our interests. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it.